What a week it has been, but I've got the Week in Review show for you. Coming up, Matt Continetti, Ben Domenech. I'll be joined by Dr. Larry Arnn from Hillsdale College. But as on most Fridays when we are lucky, I begin the hour with John Ellis, founder of News Items. And if you know anything, I start every day with news items, and I get ready for the show with news items, and John is the founder of News Items. But John sent something to me today that reminded me of Wag the Dog when Dustin Hoffman said this.
This is nothing.
This is nothing. The market's on my mind, right? I was going to lead with the market, but John Ellis, when you write to me, this is the most important report I've ever read about the future of AI, my eyebrows go up. Tell us about that, and welcome. Good to see you, John.
Thanks for having me. There's a technology correspondent who writes for the New York Times named Kevin Roos, and he has a piece today about something called the AI Futures Project. It's co-run by a guy who used to be a researcher at OpenAI. And what they did was they sort of systematically set out to predict what would happen in the next 2 or 3 years as artificial intelligence advanced. And if I do nothing else for your listeners for the rest of the time that I'm on this show, they should go to AI-27.com. So AI-27.com. It describes how AI will accelerate and how AI will eventually code itself and how AI might eventually go rogue. It's absolutely a breathtaking report, and I can't urge your listeners strongly enough to dial into AI-27.com.
No, I will. I'll repeat that because you're not prone to overstatement. The reason I use news items is you're pretty level-headed. You've been a newsman your entire life. You've covered artificial intelligence fairly comprehensively. Most people who follow me on X usually wake up to see the first thing I post is from news items. It's one of your 10 or 15 stories that you put up. What is most alarming about this report, John Ellis?
I think the thing that we sort of forget is that, if you look at the employment of coders, okay, people who can code, write computer code and write AI code, it's a bell curve. It started sometime a while back, and there were very few people who are capable of doing it. And then there's this great surge of coders, and it goes up to the top of the chart. And now it's all the way down to the bottom of the chart. And the reason for that is that AI is essentially coding itself. And as it gets smarter, the coding gets smarter. And eventually what the report predicts, it's obviously they don't know, but they're, the co-founder of this project was a top researcher at AI, so OpenAI, so he knows what's going on. And eventually what you get to is that the machines are smarter than the people. And so how do you regulate that? How do you control it? And that's what the report, it just lays it out month by month, essentially. It's a fascinating read, and I think everyone should read it because,
all right,
go ahead.
I'm going to then bring up the tariffs, and your second big story of the week is the killer reverse tariff, what China might do with Taiwan. But I'm curious if you think AI is going to accelerate market volatility. Because machine trading already takes place, hook up machine trading to AI to try and figure out what will be the next market bounce. Isn't that where we're going to end up?
I think so. The companies. I think J.P. Morgan last year spent $4 billion on AI. I'm sure that Goldman, Morgan Stanley, all the hedge funds have spent as much money as you can imagine on AI. But the good news is there's a party and a counterparty. So in theory that I bet you this and you say no and I lose and I pay you. The problem, of course, is that there's some kind of liquidity event, then I'm not able to pay you. And then the question, does that cascade down the system? Obviously, that would cascade down the system much, much faster with AI than it would otherwise.
Yeah, it reminds me of 2008, the liquidity event being there wasn't any, briefly. Let's move on to this Taiwan issue, John. Would you describe for people what you called the killer reverse tariff? I don't think China's doing this, but they could.
Well, From their point of view, it probably doesn't make sense, but it certainly sends a message, and one that they sent earlier this week, Monday and Tuesday. They conducted live fire drills around Taiwan, and the exercise, the military practice, if you will, was to blockade Taiwan. And in theory, if they did that, it would be almost impossible for the U.S. and others to break the blockade, number one. And number two, there wouldn't be much we could do if they decided in the blockade to charge a customs fee. So if there was chips coming out of Taiwan, there would have to be a fee paid to China to let the chips, get through the blockade. That was a message that the regime was sending to President Trump. President Trump chose to ignore it, and probably rightly so, because for China to throw the supply chain of chips into question would impact not just the U.S., it would impact them as well. So, but it was notable that they did this on Monday and Tuesday of this week.
It's been a wild week. Let's do something that's not alarming in any way. It's just very interesting. Multi-generational homes, you write to me, this year, 17% of home purchases were multi-generational. When I practiced law, and I retired in 2016, I represented home builders and developers. They didn't build many multi-generational homes. This is kind of new, John Ellis. It's been 10 years I've been out of the business, but this is not what they were selling then.
Yeah, no, I mean the American dream is, you get a job and you work your way and you get your starter home and raise a family and etc. And this is a reversal of what you would think would be the normal course of things. People aren't buying. I mean, this is not obviously all the home market, but it was 12% of multi-generational homes, and now that number is bumped up to 17%, and that's people moving in with their parents who are aging, or moving in with not moving in with, but the kids don't move out of, and so they need a bigger house. And that's a real change. Psychologically, I think it's an enormous change for the people who, find themselves living in the home with their parents and their kids, for instance. That's way different than the movie we have about.
Yeah, my parents, when they got married after World War II, they had to live with their parents for a while because there weren't any houses. The World War II had taken all the lumber, et cetera. So everyone was living multi-generational. It wouldn't be that great a departure in American history, but it would certainly be a departure from the boomers' expectations. The market will respond. Whatever is needed, the market will respond. John, talk to people about this brain drain poll, because I don't believe it. I believe that it's accurately taken. I just don't believe the respondents, but tell them what it is.
Well, Nature magazine, which is one of the leading science magazines in the world, put out essentially on its website a question, which was, would you consider leaving the United States following the disruptions prompted by the Trump administration regarding scientific research and grants and so on and so forth? And 75% of the respondents said yes, they would consider leaving. And the people who were sort of trying to get their PhDs or getting close to getting their PhD, that group was an even higher percentage that think they would that expressed the desire or the inclination to leave the U.S. and go do work elsewhere. What makes this story important is not, people can say, I want to leave the country because I don't like Trump or whatever. That a lot of people will say that and they won't do that. What's the other side, however, is very interesting, which is there countries in Europe are offering these PhD students what they call scientific asylum. So if you want to come to France, do the research that you're doing, you can do it here with us, and we'll give you a better stipend, and we'll give you the lab, and so on and so forth. This is also beginning to happen in Canada and Portugal, etc. And if it becomes a trend, it's very, very bad news for the United States, because you don't want the smartest people and the smartest scientific minds in the country going to work in other countries.
John knows polling. Very few people actually know it. They can't read the internals. They don't understand. And I'm among the people that don't know it. That's why I read John's news items. John, what does the polling tell us about President Trump at the end of this most turbulent market week, at the end of basically 2.5 months of the fastest out of the gates I've ever experienced with a president?
Well, we don't know about this week because, we don't know if there's polling being conducted. I'm sure there's polling being conducted now, but probably there won't be any fresh numbers on this until next week. Up until there has been polling prior to that, and up until end of March, I guess. President Trump, in the three major polls that I follow, which are Gallup, the National Opinion Research Corporation, and Ipsos, which works with Reuters, all find President Trump's approval rating at 42% or 43%. And I think the narrative is that Trump has this enormous, public approval as he plows through Washington and makes all these changes and makes all these decisions. But the reality is that if these polls are correct, and I have every reason to believe that they are, his political standing is not unlike his political standing was in 2017, 2018, which is that he's underwater in terms of approval. He has approval on he has strong approval on immigration, for instance, but he is suffering the results of a sluggish economy from the point of view of the voters. And they're a little bit unnerved by the way he's going about things in Washington. So it's a caution signal for the Trump administration, I think, if they think they can just keep riding through everything. Public opinion is not with them in the way they think it is, and they should be careful.
Last question, John. The thing that matters that I've been selling is that the Congress has to pass the budget reconciliation package because they can't lay that tax hike on America in 2026. Do you agree with me on that? That on that hangs the success of term two?
Well, I think I think that tax cut, then it's going to be yes.
John Hill, as always, thank you. Go get your news item subscription so you can be smart every morning, or at least start at the same place I do every morning, having surveyed 10 to 15 different stories that matter most. John Ellis, you can also follow on X at Ellis Items. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Hugh.
I do want to remind you of the Job Creator Network Summit that is happening in Savannah on May 1st and 2nd. And it's called the Freedom Fighters Summit. They do it every year. I'm going this year. I've not gone in years past. Bill Bennett's coming. Mike Gallagher's coming. So is Governor Youngkin, Governor Kemp. A lot of fun people. Stephen Moore will be there. By that time, the tariff story will have shaken out, and there'll be 3 more stories. But we'll get together with many like-minded people who believe in growth and in education reform and all the great things that the Job Creator Network stands for. But if you want to go, they're down. I think they're under 130 tickets now. All you have to do is head over to jcn2025summit.com. JCN is in Job Creators Network. jcn2025summit.com to get your ticket. If you use the promo code Salem, your second ticket, you want to go with your partner, your friend, your spouse, will be 50% off. And so it's not 2 for the price of 1, it's 1.5 for the price of 1. Or is it 2 for the price of 1.5? I think that's it. I don't do math. But I do want you to come to the Job Creator Summit. We're going to have a lot of fun in Savannah, Georgia, May 1st and 2nd. Find out about it at jcn2025summit.com. Let's go back to my conversation with, well, first let me play Donald Trump on Air Force One, cut number 2, talking about the tariffs.
This is a patient that was very sick. We really inherited a terrible economy, as you know, with a lot of problems, including loss of manufacturing and plants closed up all over the country. You know, we've lost 90,000 plants since NAFTA, if you think of that. 90,000. It's not even believable. And about 6 million jobs. And so it was a sick patient. It went through an operation on Liberation Day. And it's going to be It's going to be a booming country, a very booming country. It's going to be amazing, actually. And we see
He
it.
said the same thing before he got on the helicopter, and I want to play that clip number 4.
I think it's going very well. It was an operation, like when a patient gets operated on, and it's a big thing. I said this would exactly be the way it is. We have $6 or $7 trillion coming into our country, and we've never seen anything like it. The markets are going to boom, the stock is going to boom, the country is going to boom, and the rest of the world wants to see, is there any way they can make a deal? They've taken advantage of us for many, many years. For many years, we've been at the wrong side of the ball, and I'll tell you what, I think it's going to be unbelievable. The thing that people have to talk about, we're up almost to $7 trillion of investment coming into our country, and you'll see how it's going to turn out. Our country's going to boom.
All right, now I want you to know, in the Financial Times, before I play the conclusion of my interview with John Ellis, in the Financial Times today is the headline, Donald Trump triggers race to offer U.S. concessions before tariffs hit. Nations prepare offers to Washington, including weapons deals, dropping their own tariffs, and moves against China. So I know the market is bad. I'll cover it after the close next hour. I know it's bad, but I also think the surgery is tough surgery. And the argument for me is frame it in the fact that we're in Cold War 2.0 with China. Let's go back to my conversation with John Ellis off air moments ago. I'm back on now with John Ellis, the founder of News Items. John knows polling. Very few people actually know it. They can't read the internals. They don't understand. And I'm among the people that don't know it. That's why I read John's News Items. John, what does the polling tell us about President Trump at the end of this most turbulent market week, at the end of basically 2.5 months of the fastest out of the gates I've ever experienced with a president?
Well, we don't know about this week because we don't know if there's polling being conducted. I'm sure there's polling being conducted now, but probably there won't be any fresh numbers on this until next week. Up until there has been polling prior to that, and up until end of March, I guess, President Trump, in the 3 major polls that I follow, which are Gallup, the National Opinion Research Corporation, and Ipsos, which works with Reuters, all find President Trump's approval rating at 42% or 43%. And I think the narrative is that Trump has this enormous, public approval as he plows through Washington and makes all these changes and makes all these decisions. But the reality is that if these polls are correct, and I have every reason to believe that they are, his political standing is not unlike his political standing was in 2017, 2018, which is that he's underwater in terms of approval. He has approval on he has strong approval on immigration, for instance, but he is suffering the results of a sluggish economy from the point of view of the voters. And they're a little bit unnerved by the way he's going about things in Washington. So it's a caution signal for the Trump administration, I think, if they think they can just keep riding through everything. Public opinion is not with them in the way they think it is, and they should be careful.
Last question, John. The thing that matters that I've been selling is that the Congress has to pass the budget reconciliation package because they can't lay that tax hike on America in 2026. Do you agree with me on that? That on that hangs the success of term 2?
Well, I think I think that tax cut, then it's going to be yes.
John, as always, thank you. Go get your News Item subscription so you can be smart every morning, or at least start at the same place I do every morning, having surveyed 10 to 15 different stories that matter most. John Ellis, you can also follow on X at Ellis Items. Thank you, John. The thing I am going to remind you of, in the first segment, he told us the report on artificial intelligence that he told me is the most important thing he's read, and he follows AI pretty closely, can be found at ai-27.com. AI-27.com. It's Friday. We are lucky. Matt Continetti in the house. Now, it's getting harder to introduce you, Matt. You're back in prison. You're at AEI today from your cell at
we
AEI.
established. Yeah, it's an East German spy cell here where I'm reporting from.
The Stasi headquarters. Can we not get like a poster of Starry Night?
I'll bring in a plant for next week.
You've joined the Free Press. You're a Free Beacon columnist. Of course, you're on the Commentary podcast. You're the author of The Right. You've done a lot of history. This week is a market crash. And Marco Rubio said as much today, 10% correction, tariffs unsettled. I'm not a trader, so I don't get upset about these things. But I don't give market advice. And I've gone through 1999, 2001, 2008. Actually, I was working in the government in 1987 on Black Friday. How do you react to market upheavals like this?
Well, I mean, I think no one likes a market upheaval, but when you have the longer view, as you suggest, Hugh, you recognize that markets go through these periods, and then in the long run, there's no safer place than to invest in the United States. I liken this crash to not so much earlier stock market slides, like, say, in March 2020, when we went into lockdown and the market went south, but the Nixon shock of 1971, August 1971, when Richard Nixon announced his new economic policy, cutting off the connection between gold and the US dollar, imposing wage and price controls, and imposing some tariffs. That was a huge change in American economic policy initiated by a president in order to kind of turn over the playing board of the global economy. And I think that's what we're living through right now with President Trump.
Now, Matt, someone's got to speak up for the best case for the tariff. So I'm going to try. And it happened this morning in the Financial Times, where they began by saying nations are rushing to make a deal with Donald Trump, whether it's on weapons purchases or actions against China or cutting their own tariffs. And it proceeds to lay out, and the Financial Times, pretty good newspaper, what Donald Trump was looking for was to reset the rules of the global economy, I think in a way that recognizes we're in Cold War 2.0. You know, that we are not in the era after 1991 where we can afford to be everybody's rich relative and bail them out. We really have to reorganize into with us or with them. What do you make of that argument?
Well, I'm persuaded by that argument when we're dealing with China. I think one difference between the trade war in Trump 1 and what we're seeing develop in Trump 2 is the scope of the tariffs. So in the first Trump administration in 2018, President Trump said, famously that trade wars are good and easy to win. And he started imposing tariffs primarily on China as an effort to decouple our economy from what is essentially a near peer competitor or an adversary to the United States, a challenger to the United States. What we have here is massive tariffs on China announced on Liberation Day. But we also have huge tariff increases on basically every other country on the world. And what I think Trump is doing here, and specifically with focusing on some of the Southeast Asian countries that have had high tariffs slapped on them this week, is he noticed that in the first trade war, when he imposed duties on products coming from China, the manufacturers just moved their production not to the United States, but to other low-wage countries close to China. And so in this effort, what he's trying to do is say, look, it needs to come back to the United States. You can't just move from China to Vietnam, say. You can't get around the tariff that way. We're going to have high tariffs everywhere in order to incentivize people moving production into the United States.
I agree with that. I also, and we'll talk about this during the break, I also think there's an opportunity here for people to sort of ally themselves unequivocally with the United States. I do not think President Macron of France did himself any favors by threatening Trump today. Do you think that's the way to approach Trump in the aftermath of the first Liberation Day announcement?
Well, I think we have 10 years of experience, Hugh, demonstrating that the way to approach President Trump is don't threaten him or attack him or call him names, but get on the phone and say, how can we work this out? Is there anything we can do? And there is the possibility, we'll see, there's the possibility that countries will do that in the coming weeks. And there may be some relief for some of our allies and other trading partners that are not China in the months ahead. At the same time, though, we should remember that President Trump believes in this policy. This is what he has wanted to do really since the 1980s, if not before.
Right.
And he's done it.
The hole in my theory is that he believed this a long time before China got into the WTO. Matt, if you believe we were going to be in a shooting conflict with China within the next 10 years over Taiwan or anything else, would you not want right now to get as much production in the United States of as much critical materials? In his Liberation Day speech, he mentioned antibiotics and shipbuilding specifically. Do you think that might be part of the motivation? Because Peter Navarro is his number one trade advisor. Peter wrote Death by China. I do think there's some China hawks, not just Mike Waltz, not just Peter Navarro, but a bunch of China hawks in the White House.
I think one thing that the pandemic showed was that we are sometimes at risk of dependency on China for critical products. And remember what we went through with masks, for the kind of base components of pharmaceuticals. We've seen that there are some strategic commodities that China has amassed over its rise in the past decades, and that America needs to figure out not only how we can have independence from China with those ingredients, but also our defense industrial base. Hugh, this is something that you and I have been talking about for a very long time. You can't be a superpower when your defense industrial base is as corroded as it's become. And so there are reasons that we should support policies that help reindustrialize the United States. I think when we look at Liberation Day, we should also recognize that there are huge duties on China. There's no question China was really hurt by Liberation Day, and that's one reason China retaliated this morning, levying tariffs on the United States. But duties were also imposed on Taiwan. And so I would probably go about it a little bit differently in preparing for any future conflict with China. I would try to work with the Taiwanese a little bit more diplomatically, say, than impose these tariffs on them. Again, kind of the harsh medicine that Trump uses on our allies again and again in order to get them to rearm, take on more of their own defense, and maybe also move some of those important chip factories to the United States.
And Matt, I do listen to commentary every day, and I often hear reference to Trump, the developer, is deeply embedded here. Every developer I worked for 27 years, when they would go into a county or a local jurisdiction, they would ask for density far more than they expected to end up with. You open with density of 10 per acre, and you end up settling with density at 3 per acre. If you're lucky, sometimes 2.5 per acre. I just think that is the part of the development code that maybe non-developers or non-professionals who work for developers aren't aware. Trump always opens hard. It's just who he is.
That's right. It is who he is. And I think one thing to keep in mind here is he's in a rush, too. Well, we have about 16 months before the midterm elections. And while the stock market is experiencing pain right now, Trump's bet is that these policies will work out to produce economic growth and rising median incomes for workers by election day 2026. And so, yeah, he's going big now, but we can't make any definitive judgment right now because we know that the policy is going to develop in unexpected ways before the midterm elections.
Yeah, it's a big, big bet. And you're absolutely right to characterize that. And Donald Trump is nothing if not someone who's willing to make him. Matt, the least reported and most important story, and I think it is the most important story no matter how much reporting it got, is the fact that we've parked a half dozen B-2s at least on Diego Garcia. A second carrier group has entered the Gulf that can hit Iran. We've deployed anti-missile batteries to Bahrain and other places in the near Iran, Middle East. And we've sent A-10s there, which are only useful in support of infantry or to deter infantry. It looks to me like Trump is serious about you open up and you denuclearize or we bomb. And I don't know that anyone's paying attention because of the tariffs and the markets. What do you think?
Yeah, Iran has definitely slipped under the radar. Of course, we're continuing our campaign against the Houthis, and some of the military assets that have been moving into the Gulf region are involved in that offensive as well. I think we're reaching a moment of decision with Iran. Hugh, President Trump announced earlier this spring that he had sent the letter to the Ayatollah Khamenei. That letter included a 2-month deadline for deciding what would happen to the Iranian nuclear program. It was unclear whether that 2-month deadline began with the receipt of the letter, or whether it began with direct negotiations. And the Ayatollah Khamenei has hedged. They refused direct negotiations. The Iranians are holding out the hope that Americans might be enticed into indirect negotiations like they had with the Biden administration. And President Trump is going to have to decide, does he want to repeat Biden administration foreign policy, probably to no good end when it comes to figuring out the end result, ending the Iranian nuclear program? Or is he going to finally say enough is enough? And I noticed, too, that he said just today, Hugh, that he is in talks with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for perhaps another visit by Netanyahu to the White House in the coming week. That would be another, I think, sign that the president is serious about resolving this problem in the Middle East.
Let me play cut 6 for you so the audience. This is Donald Trump on Air Force One. I think yesterday, cut number 6.
So you mentioned Netanyahu recently. Israel has now talked about staying in Gaza, doing long-term occupation. Has anything changed in regard to the U.S. Gaza-Israel plans?
I spoke to him today, as a matter of fact. And I think he's going to be coming to our country sometime in the not-too-distant future, maybe next week. And we'll speak about Israel, and we'll speak about what's going on. That's another thing we'd like to get solved. And I think we will get it solved. I think he very well may be coming next month.
All right, so that, Matt Continetti, whatever daylight opened between Israel and the United States is gone. And the new book, Fight, I don't know if you've read John Allen and Amy Parnes' new book, or seen the Netanyahu interview in Hebrew with Gowd. I think his name is Gowd. There was a lot of difference between Team Biden and Team Netanyahu. I mean, there were major disagreements on everything. I don't think we understood how big the gap was. Do you think we're finding out?
Yeah, we're beginning to find out with these new tell-alls from the Biden administration. But we also know, Hugh, that the Biden administration was slow-walking arms shipments to Israel, and the Biden administration was continually giving the Israelis bad advice. I mean, leading to the kind of pause in the campaign to go into the Hamas stronghold of Rafah and the Gaza Strip for months, that delayed the eventual destruction, the killing of Yahya Sinwar, the architect of the October 7th attack. So there was plenty of evidence that the Biden administration, while talking about its support for Israel in the abstract, was in fact holding Israel back and undermining the Israeli campaign against Hamas and then Hezbollah. That's not the case with the Trump administration. And now the real question is Trump decided that it is time to set the Iranian nuclear program back indefinitely?
I hope it is. 2 scandals this week, and we'll cover one now and one during the break, and we'll be done. I'll let you go. Thank you, Matt, for your time. First scandal is, in the book Fight, it is revealed President Biden's cognitive impairment was serious, first noticed by Kevin McCarthy in late 2022, echoed by Eric Swalwell in early 2023. It got worse. Everybody knew. Do you think we'll get an accounting, Matt Continetti, on who knew and what they knew and how ill-served we were by this group of people?
We're beginning to. I saw that Ron Klain, one of Biden's closest advisors and a former chief of staff, is beginning to kind of tiptoe toward recognizing that Biden was in decline during his presidency. But, when we look at these headlines, Hugh, and we have to remember that the media and Democratic elites and the expert class all said that Biden was fine. And that if you questioned Biden's state 4 years ago, you were marked for cancellation. So I have to say that the way in which the media covered up for Biden does make me raise an eyebrow when I hear the uniform chorus of experts say that Trump's policy on trade is going to end in utter disaster. This group of experts are wrong. They're almost always wrong. And so one lesson I take away from the Biden experience is we really have to look at what the Beltway class says with a huge dollops of salt.
I gave a talk earlier this week. Gallup has been doing the same poll about trust in the U.S. media for 70 years. In 1972, 70% of Americans trusted media. Today, it's 30%. I don't think it's ever going back to 70%. Can we get it back to 50%, Matt Continetti?
No, I don't think we can, Hugh. And well, look, I mean, we're not going to go back to the country that we were in 1972 either. And in some ways, that's a very good thing. It means that we have a proliferation of different media sources we can turn to, and that the official story, which you often hear promulgated from the mainstream media, does face challenge from alternative media. And I think that is a good thing, even if it means most Americans seriously distrust the mainstream media.
Matt, Chuck Grassley gave a floor speech this week, said there's a new IG report from the Department of Homeland Security that shows during the Biden years, 448,000 unaccompanied minors crossed the border that we know about. Doesn't count the people that we don't know about, but we know that 448,000 people under the age of 18. 31,000 of those we never even got an address for. 48,000 got given a notice to show up at a hearing that they didn't show up for. 223,000 didn't get a hearing scheduled. It's almost mind-boggling how many children we turn loose in an America full of predators on children. Have you seen this story? I mean, Chuck Grassley's the only guy I saw mention it. I went and found the IG report. It's written in standard IG. You can't possibly make this interesting style, but it's shocking to me that we did that.
Yeah, and I hope more attention is paid to this story. And let's not forget, too, that the folks trafficking these kids were the narcos, were the human traffickers, were the drug traffickers. And so oftentimes children are exploited as drug mules, for example. So it's just a large, caravan of human misery that the Biden administration allowed to come into the country for 4 years unchecked. And
now,
that's, I think, why... Mm-hmm.
I've always dismissed the Cloward-Piven theory as classic radical left chic that no one took seriously. But I don't know if anyone intended to do it. But they just did overwhelm the system. There was no dealing with what Biden... And then Trump turned around and closed it, proving that it could have been closed. 1 minute. Yeah.
No, exactly. This was Trump's signal achievement in his first 3 months in office. He has shut the border down. Border crossings are at historic lows. And the immigration agenda of this administration is popular, and the public approves of it. And it's one reason, Hugh, that I think his approval ratings are still in that narrow band, hovering at around 50%, and why the public is willing to give Trump some leeway on trade policies, for example, because they've seen what he's been able to achieve on the border, and they are for what he's achieved on the border.
We'll check back. And John Ellis thinks those numbers have dropped this week, but we'll check back in a couple of weeks to find out. Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow him on X at Continetti. Listen to him on the Commentary Pod. Read him at the Free Press and the Washington Free Beacon. I'll play you the rest of the Matt Continetti interview in just a moment. I want to play for you first Doug Burgum making an announcement on Fox News, which is a big deal. It's a very big deal. The fact is, maybe the tape is frozen, he announced the first new leases in the Gulf of America. Or if you're old school, you want to say Gulf of Mexico. I don't get excited about stuff like that. All I know is I get excited about energy production. I know, and I'll give the market report in the next hour. It's a bad day on the market. It's a bad week on the market. But here is what Matt Continetti and I talked about, what I'll be talking about tomorrow on Brian Kilmeade's show, One Nation. I am back from my last chat with Matt Continetti. Matt, Chuck Grassley gave a floor speech this week, said there's a new IG report from the Department of Homeland Security that shows during the Biden years, 448,000 unaccompanied minors crossed the border that we know about. Doesn't count the people that we don't know about, but we know that 448,000 people under the age of 18. 31,000 of those we never even got an address for. 48,000 got given a notice to show up at a hearing that they didn't show up for. 223,000 didn't get a hearing scheduled. It's almost mind-boggling how many children we turn loose in an America full of predators on children. Have you seen this story? I mean, Chuck Grassley's the only guy I saw mention it. I went and found the IG report. It's written in standard IG. You can't possibly make this interesting style, but it's shocking to me that we did that.
Yeah, and I hope more attention is paid to this story. And let's not forget, too, that the folks trafficking these kids were the narcos, were the human traffickers, were the drug traffickers. And so oftentimes children are exploited as drug mules, for example. So it's just a large, caravan of human misery that the Biden administration allowed to come into the country for 4 years unchecked. And
now,
that's, I think, why... Mm-hmm.
I've always dismissed the Cloward-Piven theory as classic radical left chic that no one took seriously. But I don't know if anyone intended to do it. But they just did overwhelm the system. There was no dealing with what Biden... And then Trump turned around and closed it, proving that it could have been closed. 1 minute. Yeah.
No, exactly. This was Trump's signal achievement in his first 3 months in office. He has shut the border down. Border crossings are at historic lows. And the immigration agenda of this administration is popular, and the public approves of it. And it's one reason, Hugh, that I think his approval ratings are still in that narrow band, hovering at around 50%, and why the public is willing to give Trump some leeway on trade policies, for example, because they've seen what he's been able to achieve on the border, and they are for what he's achieved on the border.
We'll check back. And John Ellis thinks those numbers have dropped this week, but we'll check back in a couple of weeks to find out. Matt Continetti, thank you. Follow him on X at Continetti. Listen to him on the Commentary Pod. Read him at the Free Press and the Washington Free Beacon. I have Ben Domenech for about 20 minutes, so I want to get right to Ben, editor-at-large at The Spectator, Fox News contributor. Ben, welcome. I concluded last hour talking with Matt Continetti about a story about the border. Chuck Grassley, God love him, brought it to the floor, or I wouldn't have known about it. The IG at Homeland Security put out a report. During the 4 years of Joe Biden, we know that 448,000 unaccompanied minors crossed the border, and they vanished into the country to various places. We lost 31,000 of them. 48,000 of them did not come back for their appointment with the immigration authorities. 223,000 of them never got an appointment with the immigration authorities. And that doesn't even begin to account for those that we didn't have any contact with. It's horrific. It's not getting any news given the tariffs and the market sell-off. But what do you think of that? That Trump closed the border. That did not have to happen. It's a human tragedy.
Well, I mean, I think that one of the issues that you're dealing with there is that even that is just an initial calculation, because the after effects of that number of people, the cascade of violence, crime, and other incidents that follow through is something that is always, frankly, uninteresting to the major national media sources that could track such things down. And it's also something that is uninteresting to the powers that be when Democrat administrations are in charge. So that's one of the reasons why I think, you can only deal with the numbers of the people that are measurable, and that includes those folks who never show up. One of the things that I think we're learning about the case that was blown up in the Atlantic about the Maryland father is the term, which is, I think, the new replacement for a noted cleric, or however you want to refer to it. This Maryland father who got sent to El Salvador. Well, the initial story, of course, sounded quite damning. But one of the things that, very quickly emerged is that this is someone who's been here illegally since 2012, and someone who had already been, forced to appear before the court multiple times. And had also been tagged for not showing up multiple times, and basically had been in a situation where they made the claim that they could not be returned to El Salvador because of a criminal dispute. But then it turns out that upon further investigation, it's because of a criminal dispute because they're a member of MS-13 and there's a rival gang. So guess what? That's not the kind of person that we want here in America. And they're going to turn these types of stories into sob stories because they're desperate to find them. But the truth is that the actual record of this is a total indictment of the Biden administration, the choices that were made by Alejandro Mayorkas. It's why I supported his impeachment, by the way, and we can talk about impeachment, but it's one of these things where, I truly believe that if you are someone who simply is not doing your job, you cannot do your job, then I believe that you are violating your oath of office, and in that refusal, you are someone who can be removed by the Congress, through the due process and under law. But this is the type of situation that could have been avoided, and the after effects of it, as I said, are incalculable in terms of the number of lives that are going to be affected by the presence of all of these people, by what they are doing here, and what they are doing, by the way, continually in order to pay back the cartels that got them here during particularly the Biden administration.
Yeah, what I mostly fear for the children that have been completely lost, and some of them were 17 or 18 years old and they'll be adults, but a lot of them were 10, and we saw a lot of small kids. We just don't know what's happened to them. And
no. And that's not something you're not going to find an estimate for that, Hugh.
No,
it's not the GAO. The IGs. They don't have the capacity to estimate the kind of damage that is being done to these children, and it's something that we're only going to learn in the future, and only in recollection and in frankly the sad after effects of crime and of rampant criminality that has taken over major portions of American cities under sanctuary city laws and under the kinds of policies that the Democratic Party has supported for years, and that I think Republicans have railed against but have done not enough prior to President Trump.
The second story that will probably get wiped out by the tariffs and the market panic, and it's a panic. I've been through so many panics. I know a panic when I see it, and it'll recorrect again over the course of a month or so. But lost in that, the book by John Allen and Amy Parnes called Fight.
Oh, Lord.
I spent an hour with them. It's on my YouTube channel. We aired it on the Salem News Channel. It's stunning how many people knew he was cognitively impaired.
I've had my news appetite consumed by the same issues related to the tariffs, so I haven't checked out your YouTube video yet, but I will. But the reporting and the excerpts that I have seen are astounding, and they are an absolute, I think, indictment of the Democratic brass that knew that this was going on, that pretended very much that it was not happening, and that then had to scramble when proof positive was put in front of the American people that it was happening. And even that, I think, even short of that, consider this, Hugh. Without that debate happening when it happened, imagine the scenario where Biden just refuses to debate. Imagine a scenario where he just says, I'm not going to go on stage with Donald Trump. He's, someone who, contested an election and blah, 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 or enemy of democracy, whatever excuse he wanted to pick. Imagine a situation where he did that and had a reasonable chance of winning the presidency again. What would we be doing right now? What would we be facing as a country in terms of his current mental state? Would he just be sleeping on the beach again, for as many weeks as possible? I mean, it's absolutely abhorrent. And I think, again, this is not about partisanship. I want a functional president.
Yeah. Anita Dunn, by the way, was the one that recommended no debates because she knew what could happen and did happen. Ron Klain pushed for him. I don't know Ron well. We were colleagues for a while at the Post, exchange emails. I think he's very smart, but I think he left because of this. He's not said that, but I think he left because he saw that.
I think that is a very valid suspicion, Hugh, and I would not be surprised if that was the case. There are certain people who I believe, will be telling this story over the course of the next couple of years in ways that only enlighten us more and make our eyes, raise in terms of the kind of things that were going on internally that needed to be, made public to the American people a long time ago. One thing that I would point out about this, though, is it is such an example of only now the truth can be told, meaning that we have dealt with so many of these storylines over the past couple of years, whether it was about COVID, whether it was about lockdowns, whether it was about the different nature of decisions that were made. We have dealt with one story after another where people will be screaming in the moment and called out as being extremists or dealing in misinformation or disinformation or something of the like. And then a year or two later, and usually that's about the timeline, you suddenly have this flood of the same people who were condemning those folks and the same institutions that were condemning those ideas as being unacceptable to be printed, basically going back and doing a look back where they say, well, actually now upon further investigation, we can say these crazy people had a point.
Well, yeah, I told an audience this week that in 1972, Gallup showed that 70% of Americans trusted media. Today, that's 31%. Do you think it's ever going to rebound to even 40 or 50%, Ben?
I honestly don't. I actually think that the one hope that we have for a rebound is simply the explosion of new entities that are online that have already, proven their capability of getting to the bottom of some of these things. But I also think that there's just a level of denialism about these different storylines. I mean, one that was probably the most recent that is continuing to a certain extent, though I think the Brits are ahead of the curve on this, is the argument about, of course, the treatment of young children for gender dysphoria and the like that is rooted in extremely bad and unfounded science. And that's the kind of thing that I think, in the next couple of years from now, people are going to be saying, well, hey, Europe is actually right about the UK is ahead of this. They figured out that this was a bad idea, and we had all these reports, and we were unwilling to admit it because of local domestic politics and the like. But that is one more area where I think people pretend that these problems don't exist until the point where it's impossible for them to pretend anymore.
Ben, what do you make of the tariffs and the market reaction?
So I think that this is one of the most predictable situations that we could have had, and yet somehow people were in denial about it. When on the actual day that the president was sworn in, I was doing the coverage on Fox, and I said, I think the real challenge for this presidency is going to be the economy, because I think that, on foreign policy, I think he can make some very quick moves. On the border, I think he can make some very quick moves, as we've seen, that are going to have significant, positive policy ramifications away from the Biden agenda. But that when it came to the economy, the big problem for him was going to be, one, people were thoroughly optimistic about his ability to put things back in place that would make the economy roar again, as it did under his first administration. And that secondly, he was bent on a tariff regime, a tariff agenda that struck me as being much more far-reaching than people were accounting for, and potentially, one that could put us in the kind of panic that you just referenced. This is something that I think is a big bet on the part of the president. I personally do not like tariffs. I've never liked tariffs. As you know, I'm a Rand Paul, Thomas Massey guy on that kind of thing. I think that they are only useful to bring people to a negotiation table, and effectively what it seems like he's trying to do is to bring everyone in the world to a negotiation table. And I think the problem with that is the pain is front-loaded. For a lot of these industries, they do not have the capability to move quickly. They do not have the ability to move back into the American economy the way that they would need to. And also, of course, there are the beckoning interests of other nations around the world that can tempt them to go in different directions. And so one of the things that I think is going to have to happen here is either these deals are going to have to happen quickly, and they're going to have to be ones that are bilateral or that are, with groups of nations that the president has confidence in, and that, he's going to support himself, and that other nations have the confidence in as well. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck in a significant, I think, amount of economic pain for a period of time that is indeterminate. And that indeterminate period of time could end up dramatically affecting Republicans in the midterms, who I think are very frustrated by this. They were hoping he was going to do something more modest. I think this is also cultural, though. I mean, we hear what we hear from J.D. Vance about the need to restore the type of American industry that we had in the past. Well, again, that's not something that happens overnight. And a lot of those people who need to be educated in the trades and be able to do the types of jobs, working with their hands and working with the kind of mechanisms that they need to. They're in 8th and 9th grade right now. They're not ready to go, and that's a big problem for the American economy and for the American people. And I'm not sure that the people around the president or certainly Republicans in Congress have confidence that that's going to be something that's going to be resolved anytime soon.
I want to underscore what Ben said at the beginning there. I agree with most of what he said. Donald Trump, this is from the Financial Times 6-7 hours ago. Donald Trump triggers race to offer U.S. concessions before tariffs hit. Nations prepare offers to Washington, including weapons deals, dropping their own tariffs and moves against China. That's the best case scenario. We'll see about that. I want to finish my time with Ben Domenech today talking about the fact that a half dozen B-2s have flown to Diego Garcia, at least, we know at least 6, along with refueling tankers and the sort of support aircraft that can help them overfly Iran. Same time, a second carrier group is in the Gulf. We've deployed A-10s, which is unusual. We've also sent anti-missile batteries to Bahrain and other places in the near Iran, Middle East. Ben, I think we're on a clock because you can't leave those. Someone pointed out to me, it's very expensive to do the double deployment of carriers. It's also very exposed to leave the B-2s at Diego Garcia. We can't do that. What do you think is going on?
I mean, I think this is as ramped up as it's been. This is a situation that is untenable. And so because of that, I think that your suspicions, which I know that we discussed a little bit last week, that we are headed toward an actual significant strike against Iran is very high. And what that does to the global scenario, and especially amidst all of the different negotiations that have been happening regarding the war in Ukraine and with Russia and with obviously China around this that are happening behind the scenes, those aspects of this could be really thrown into a cocked hat if you end up in a situation where you have this going on at the same time. Now, maybe this is a play where that type of threat is being pressed there as something that will attract their attention and concern those other nations that have relationships with Iran. But one of the things that I think we have to consider in this moment is that we don't really have a clear idea yet, as early as it is in this presidency, about who the driving force is when it comes to American foreign policy and national security. We know who the people are, obviously, but we also know that there's different dynamics that are at work here behind the scenes about who is most trusted, who's up, who's down. And that's, a tea leaf reading thing that normally we have a little more time to work with. And we don't, as someone who's reporting about this actively, there are basically 3 pieces I tried to get written this week, I will say, about some of the things that have been going on behind the scenes at the National Security Council and elsewhere that I got to the brink and couldn't get because, there's just not enough on-record stuff. But off-record stuff, there's a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of jockeying up and down and who's trying to get pole position on what ought to be done about Iran. Yeah. And so I'm just not sure how confident we can be about who is in the lead on that.
What is on record is what the president said on Air Force One, which is Netanyahu may be here next week. Coming soon, maybe here next week. At the same time, Gadi Taubman, an Israeli journalist, sat down with Prime Minister Netanyahu, and I had to read the subtitles because it was in Hebrew. But it turns out there was a lot of disagreements with Team Biden. Biden, whoever was running Biden's shot, they were really anti-Israel. They really did not want them to win that war. And that's changed. There's no daylight now. Netanyahu and Trump. If there's one person that Trump's going to listen to in the world and take advice from, I think it's probably Bibi Netanyahu. What do you think?
I completely agree, and I think that that's an indication that, essentially when we listen to him, and sometimes you do have to go and do the subtitle read, and I've done that before myself with him, you will be hearing, I think, essentially from his lips to Trump's ears. And that's, something that should give people a lot of expectations about how aggressive this administration is willing to be with Iran.
All right, last question, Ben Domenech. You're about the age of my kids. I never give financial advice to anyone outside of my family. But what I have told them is don't sell anything ever in your life, you will go through at least 3 or 4 market crashes. In 1987, I was in the government when Black Friday happened. Then we had the dot-com bubble. Then we had 2008, and now we've got this. And there's another one in COVID. There are 5, actually, in my adult life. So maybe I should tell him 5. How do you feel about it as a young dad?
I feel a little more optimistic, just simply because I'm assuming that I have a little more cell life, on some of this. But one of the things that I would say to people is, I think it's a mistake to overreact. One of the questions that I've gotten about, should I rush out and buy a car? Should I rush out and do this, that, or the other? I think overreacting to things like this is almost always turns out to be a bad idea. And while there are people, who will tell you otherwise, I think, Hugh, your experience is one of the reasons that I feel the same way, which is more confidence in staying the course. And frankly, I bet on America, and I bet on America time and again, and I haven't lost. So it's I think a challenge for a lot of people, especially those who are closer to retirement. But I do not think panic is warranted.
Good and wonderful words to close on, Ben Domenech. Thank you. Follow him at B. Domenech. You can also get his podcast over at the Fox News Podcast Central. And I appreciate it, Ben. He's probably off to the Nationals game. I am myself not talking to Dwayne today because he's wearing the enemy's colors. He's got the Angels gear on, and I'm not going to – I guess you can show his picture, Harley. But the Guardians are in town, and this is not a myphdweightloss.com plug. This is a plug for the Guardians are here to sweep the Angels. So tell me, Dwayne, since you cut the legs off of Tim Couch behind me, I've got him propped up back here. What are did the Angels get a rotation?
I just made it more lifelike.
Are you starting tonight? Is that why you're in uni?
I am not starting tonight. Former Cubs pitcher and now Angels second starter Soriano is pitching tonight.
And who's pitching Sunday when I go?
For us?
Yeah.
I have no idea. It doesn't matter. We'll have 2 to 3 already in the bag. We just win series. We won the series against the White Sox. We won the series against the Cardinals. How'd you do against the Padres?
Speaking of which, it's time for me to give you the Pragertopia reminder.
That's what I thought.
That our friend Dennis is recovering, and we're very happy to hear that. But you don't have to go through Prager withdrawal. You can subscribe to Pragertopia. Listen.
Hi, Tamar. How old are you?
I'm 11. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. To what do I attribute your call?
So I play violin. I want to ask you if you could recommend any classical songs for me because my bat mitzvah is soon.
So you are going to play a piece at your bar mitzvah?
Yeah.
Wow.
I just that leaves me hanging. I got to go to listen to Pragertopia to get the rest of it. It's there for you who need your dentist fix until he's back in June. Time for a market update. I do it every day. American Federal is the sponsor, AmericanFederal.com. 800-221-7694. Nick Grovich and his team at American Coin and Bullion are just pros. They know what they're doing. They buy and sell gold. They buy and sell silver. They buy and sell collectibles. They do it all, but most people just want to buy or sell gold. It is usually the case that in a market panic, interest rates drop. That happened today. The 10 years is down around 4%. And gold usually goes up. That did not happen today. The Dow went down 5.5% today. The S&P went down 6% today. The NASDAQ went down 5.8% today. Gold went down to $3,058 an ounce. So if you bought it 2 days ago, you're mad at yourself. Well, you can't. That's not why you buy anything. I'm not a trader. I don't give investment advice. I do believe in diversification. And if you're going to buy gold right now because you're worried about the international economy or a strike on Iran or China invading Taiwan, you're worried about anything. If you're going to buy gold, that's the only advice I give. Do it with Nick. Because Nick and his team have been doing it for 40 plus years. They're honest. They're straightforward. They're transparent. What do you want? How much do you want to buy? How much do you want to sell? When does the money get here? Here's how much our commission is. And the commission goes down the more you buy. Commission goes up the less you buy. Do you want it in bullion? Do you want it in Krugerrands? Do you want it in American Eagles? It's all very 1, 2, 3. Nick is not sexy. Sorry, Nick. Nick is straightforward. Nick is a pro. And I was talking to a journalist today. I said, you're a pro's pro. doing some reporting on something. Thank you, you're a pros pro. And Nick's a pros pro. It's a very trustworthy organization. If you're going to buy gold because you're just hinky, or because you're afraid inflation isn't conquered, or whatever, I don't know what you're afraid of. If you just want to diversify, and you said I wanted gold to go down a little bit after it hit, I don't know what, 31.50. Well, it's down to 30.58, $3,058 an ounce. Go to AmericanFederal.com or call 800-221-7694. Now, about the market. Stephen Miller went on Fox with Sandra Smith, cut number 14.
Well, let's first establish an important foundation. The United States is 36% of global consumption, and we're more than 25% of the world's economy. Just the United States alone. That means we get to set the rules and terms for international trade. But we've done the opposite as a country for decades now. When we hear the term globalization, what does that really mean? It means taking America's wealth and shipping it to foreign countries. So all the factories that used to be in America are now in China, Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, Canada, Mexico, parts of Africa, India, Europe, Japan, Korea. You know where they're not? The United States of America. Because our leaders allowed foreign countries to rig the rules of the game, to cheat, to steal, to rob, to plunder. That has cost America trillions of dollars in wealth. These countries cannot win a trade fight with us because they're already the ones who have cheated. So in other words, they've stolen our industries. We have all the upside here in this fight because we can now make these industries come back because we have the market. We have the consumers they need. Japan cannot replace the American automobile market. Europe can't replace the American automobile market. They need us. And this is a fundamental issue of fairness and national security. Tell me, why is it that if you go to Tokyo, there's no American cars? If you go to Berlin, there's no American cars. But on our streets, we have every foreign car there is in the world. They've locked their markets to our cars. They have stolen from our workers and our people. And President Trump is saying that has to end. We need our wealth back and our jobs back. And the quality of America, the American quality of life, will rise exponentially as these policies kick in and as the great onshoring and return of American wealth occurs.
Are you
okay, he kept going, cut number 17.
Are you concerned that this is going to put us into a recession?
The exact opposite. We inherited from Joe Biden an economy in total free fall. There has been zero jobs growth for American workers in 4 years. In other words, all jobs growth had gone to foreign workers. That is a depression, not a recession. That is a depression for the American worker. We had debt and deficits that were rising unsustainably that would lead us into a certain debt and deficit crisis. We had inflation that was in high double digits, crushing the American family, making it impossible to afford the essentials of life. We had an economy that was in a state of calamity and catastrophe. President Trump's policy of reshoring our supply chains, pushing for total expensing of capital gains, eliminating regulation, eliminating intrusive Green New Scam environmental rules, pushing for the biggest, broadest tax cut in American history, and reducing taxes on American workers, including ending taxes on tips, ending taxes on overtime, ending taxes on Social Security. This economic program is the single most important program for American wealth, prosperity, and rejuvenation that we've ever seen.
He's right, and that's why the Senate needs that this weekend and the House next week. I'm very glad to hear President Trump on Air Force One announce that he is going to be welcoming Bibi Netanyahu back to the United States probably as early as next week. I'm happy about that because if two people get along well like that, that's the second visit by Israel's prime minister in 2 months. I hope they're cooking up the best and final offer to Israel, to Iran, which is time to open up the doors to us right now or the bombs drop, and that they're coordinating that. That's what I hope they're doing. Don't know, but Trump did say it. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, I wish you are, you can watch it right now, but you can listen to it. Here's the president on Air Force One, cut number 6.
So you mentioned Netanyahu recently. Israel has now talked about staying in Gaza, doing long-term occupation. Has anything changed in regard to the U.S. Gaza-Israel plans?
I spoke to him today, as a matter of fact. and I think he's going to be coming to our country sometime in the not too distant future, maybe next week.
I want you to see that, because I'm about to tell you, you ought to go to Israel. Maybe not next week, but make your plan. It was announced this week, the Israeli Ministry of Tourism is a new sponsor of the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm very excited about that. They've never been that before. I'm very excited about that because I love the state of Israel. They are our number one strategic ally in the world, the equal of any other ally that we have. A major nuclear power that's full of innovators, with whom we do a lot of business and from whom we draw a lot of innovation and with whom we share a lot of intelligence. And we have a similar worldview, which is freedom rocks. Israel is a very free place. It's also a very contentious place. Their political discourse makes our political discourse look like kindergarten, but it's wild and it's fun. But what's even better is going. Well, go to goisrael.com and start planning your trip right now. All right, goisrael.com. This is the Ministry of Tourism is part of the government of Israel. So the government of Israel is now part of my sponsorship. I didn't go seeking them. They came seeking me. I've said the same thing about Israel for 25 years. They are the equal of any of our allies. And I've known that because I've known the Nixon policy and went to work for him in 1978. And until Trump came along, far and away, Nixon was the best friend Israel ever had. It may be now that Donald Trump is going to surpass him by getting rid of the Iranian nuclear threat. But it doesn't, there's just no danger in going to Israel. They have removed that danger completely. It's probably never been safer to be in Israel than it is right now. GoIsrael.com. It's a feature of the Israeli Ministry of Tourism. Now, I do want to play for you, I promise you, Doug Burgum, because the Secretary of the Interior made an announcement today, cut number 13.
Announcing historically the first lease to be held in what's now the Gulf of America. And a lease sale is an announcement that allows private sector companies to be able to come in and bid on certain geology in a certain geography to be able to do future development. When they bid on that lease, they pay the federal government money. And then when they develop those minerals, they pay a royalty. All of that goes towards helping reducing our debt and reducing our deficit. And so this is great for the American public. It's great for the financial business. And of course, it's also great because right now we've got 15% of U.S. Oil production comes from the Gulf of America. The Biden administration was effectively trying to drive that towards zero by shutting down leasing. We're trying to make sure that we keep that going because it's an important part of America's energy strategy.
Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. Jim Banks, by the way, Senator Banks, our friend from Indiana, talked a little bit about the Liberation Day tariffs today. Here's Jim Banks on Fox, cut number 11.
These other countries are already coming to the table, and this is what's brilliant about what President Trump is up to. He's put other countries on notice. You're not going to take advantage of us anymore. They're already reacting. Canada and Mexico is begging President Trump to come to the table and negotiate their tariffs down and do away with our tariffs, too. We know this is going to be disruptive, but there's a silver lining and good news in the midst of all of it. And as you said, it's happening right in my hometown at a General Motors plant that's going to pay more in overtime and create hundreds of new temporary, hopefully permanent jobs and make more cars in America. Because General Motors, a great American company, actually makes less cars that they sell in the U.S. than Toyota, Honda, or Subaru do. So we want General Motors to make more of those cars right here at home. I'm the son of a factory worker who worked in an auto parts factory in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Those are good-paying jobs that provide a shot at the American dream to a lot of families like mine, and that's what President Trump is bringing back to America.
I want to also play for you Larry Kudlow talking about the entire economic plan. And this is also a message to Congress. We've got to go faster. The Senate's going to work all weekend. I think their vote-a-rama starts today. Then the House should just take it, chop it, send it, give investors certainty. Cut number 5.
He is cutting taxes. He is slashing regulations. He is increasing energy production, lowering costs. And yes, he's improving fair trade. There'll be a lot of movement. You will see. I don't care what the initial reactions are. You're going to see a lot of foreign countries come here and say, we will cut this tariff, we will cut that tariff, we will cut this tariff, we will cut that tariff. That is exactly what reciprocity is all about. But the other point he makes, and again, I'm going to defend him on this, We can't keep standing by. Too many presidents have stood by. Trump went at it with China in his first term. Now he's going at it on a global basis.
We are no longer in the Marshall Plan era, where we have to rebuild Europe and stand up the West to face the Soviet Union. We are no longer in the, China's going to be like us era that followed the collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of history book by Francis Fukuyama. Now, I'm not alone. Everyone, the wish gave father to our policy. We wished that China would evolve. We wished that Russia would evolve. We wished that Iran would stop being run by religious zealots. We wished for all of that. None of that happened. And so Donald Trump has come in and said to the world, okay, 75 years ago we saved the world. 75 years we've subsidized the world. And now we need to have actual free and fair trade. And that means, on a microscopic scale, hey, Canada, let Wisconsin sell their dairy products in Canada. All right? That's all it means. We love to take your oil, but you got to let us sell there at the same time. And it's the same message around the world. We're not particularly interested in buying things from China or helping their economy. But everyone else, outside of the alliance of bad guys, business is open. Go make them an offer. The poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe. A Yankees hat on the Salem News Channel? Oh, I don't know, Joe.
Somebody took a torpedo bat to the stock market this week. It wasn't me. I didn't take economics. It didn't seem like fun. I don't think I could even pass statistics 101. I didn't talk supply side with my father or my mother. Whatever side that she was on, he was on the other. My bank account, called checking, got deposits to begin it. I figure if some checks are left, there must be money in it. Monetary theory? I know some folks who love it, but all I know about hard cash is I ain't got much of it. Not to worry, little Joe. Continue living large. Elites from all the Ivy Leagues are comfortably in charge. But we've got debts and deficits, says one man who's reviled. A pile of IOUs that all those geniuses compiled. We'd left it to those other guys to fiddle and discuss. They made a muddy mess of it, and now it's up to us. I'm told there may be pain, although there aren't certain how. To the dire warnings I say, what do we have now? I know my friends and followers will clearly disagree, but I, for one, will hunker down and calmly wait and see. And that's Econ 101 by Tarzana Joe.
Do you know, I've got clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. On my right, I've got Generalissimo wearing his Angels gear, and I got the Tarzana Joe, poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. If you're watching on the Salem News Channel, you see this. And here, you know what he did to me, Joe?
Where's your Indians hat, by the way?
He broke Tim Couch this week. Tarzana Joe.
Oh, no.
Yeah. He came in here, and he knocked it off. And I've had that since 1999.
I just made him life-size now.
It's really, and then you show up with a Yankees hat. I tell you. Joe, how's business over at TarzanaJoe.com?
Fantastic.
Are they weddings? Are they funerals? Are they goodbye? Are they
April
stock market
weddings,
crash
May
poems?
Weddings, anniversaries, memorial poems. I'm the busiest man in the poetry world. Absolutely.
I actually believe you may be the busiest commissioned poet in America. Everything that Joe writes is available at TarzanaJoe.com, including today's. And if you need a poem for any occasion, any need, write to him at TarzanaJoe@Reagan.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
I've got coming up. Let's do Pam Bondi very quickly. Cut number 12.
Today, we're here to announce the arrest of 3 more MS-13 gang members who were in this country illegally, and they were in Florida, and we will be reviewing them. They've all been arrested for first-degree murder. We will be reviewing them to see if we will seek the death penalty. This has been a long-running investigation that started in 2015.
Just want to make sure we give the shout out to the DOJ, which is back in the law enforcement business, not the lawfare business. Hats off to AG Bondi. They also named the new Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel. It's the former Solicitor General of Ohio, a Hillsdale College grad.